I'm one of those Americans from the land of the free and the home of the brave who remembers we learned about bravery and freedom from you Brits, which is why I can't understand why Great Britain is so divided on the question of the European Union. Why would Britain, the great champion of independent, responsible self-government, turn everything over to petty bureaucrats in Brussels who can control your borders, your courts, and your free market? For centuries, you have stood up for an orderly and moral civilization and national freedom. Remember back in 410 AD when you deliberately left a dysfunctional European Union? After 4 centuries of mistreatment by the Roman legal system, you got out. You obtained a formal release from the Emperor Honorius, who advised you to be on guard and to govern yourselves completely. You did, through the ups and downs of the next 1,500 years. The ups were seasons of responsible self-government. The downs were attempts by tyrants and bullies to make up dictatorial systems of law. You draw out these ups and downs, and their trajectories sort of resemble the River Thames. If we look at this as a timeline going back from the present in East London, where you have exploding Islamic communities, back past Westminster, Runnymede, the Viking battlefields of King Alfred, Roman seats of power, your heroes continually brought the nation back to common faith and a common law. In the 9th century, your young King Alfred defended the island from foreign control and strengthened British rule by reinforcing the concept of rule by a higher law derived from God's commands in the book of Exodus. In the 11th century, another Viking, Canute, attacked and did seize the British throne from Ethelred, but was then commanded by a church leader, Wulfstan, to act like a king of England by governing a free people justly with God's justice. Canute listened to Wulfstan and was converted to Christianity. He acted for the rest of his life as a civilized Christian magistrate who placed himself willingly under the authority of the English common law. Please don't be ashamed at this part of your legacy. Our best American traditions came from you, like common law, limited government, due process, and freedom. It was this tradition of responsible self-government under law that made English liberty and peace workable for 1,000 years. This science of jurisprudence rooted deeply in the justice of sovereign biblical law. These law documents aligned the law of the land with the consistent higher law of God. Heroes like the barons and churchmen of 1215 confronted the tyrant King John at Runnymede, reminding him that he was under the law of the land. Did you know that when a surviving copy of Magna Carta was exhibited in New York in 1939, 14 million Americans crowded in to see it? Jurist William Blackstone traced this British jurisprudence to British faith and reverence for God's authority. Blackstone wrote that biblical law is the original and authoritative law which is binding over all the globe, in all countries, and at all times. No human laws are of any validity if contrary to this. But something changed in the 19th century. The change was identified by the man who fought against government corruption and ended the British slave trade, the hero, William Wilberforce. Protestant leaders, primarily Anglicans, were rebranding Christianity as a kind of polite, stabilizing agency and not a living, transcendent faith in God. Wilberforce correctly said British Christianity had become nothing more than a disobedient, impious system of decent selfishness. The church invented a Christianity without God, morals without God, spirituality without God, traditions without God. And I understand how it was then an easy cultural leap to science without God, physics without God, and law without God. Wilberforce could foresee rule by the higher law being replaced by a rule by lawyers who would have to continually change and update the laws based on the evolution of society. Wilberforce rightly predicted exactly where you stand today. You're being ruled by petty lawyers in another country who think they are above the higher law. You have vowed in the past that Britons never would be slaves, and you stood by that vow again and again for centuries, resisting the Romans, the Vikings, King John, Charles I, the Nazis. So what are you doing in the EU? You need to get out of there. Don't be ashamed of your legacy. Show British heroism again on the timeline of history. You've done this before. Do it again.